In this video, I'll be testing the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S against the newcomer to the segment, the Continental ExtremeContact Sport 02. Before we get to the driving, I just want to quickly talk about the tyres. Now, I'm sure you already know this tyre. It's the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S. It was launched over 6 years ago, and that's 6 human years. In tyre years, that's like 80 or something. I'm not entirely sure on the math. But it has won more ultra high performance tyre tests than any other tyre on the market ever. And it is still winning tests. It is still the peak Michelin tyre in this segment. And before you jump on me on the comments, I know the Pilot Sport 5 does exist. I've tested it a number of times on this channel. It's not a direct replacement for this. The Pilot Sport 5 is a more touring bias sports tyre. And yes, the Pilot Sport S5, which will be the replacement for this in the future, probably does exist, but at the moment it's OE only, and we only ever test aftermarkets, and I can't get it in this 18-inch size anyway. As for the contender, this is the new Continental ExtremeContact Sport 02, launched at the end of last year, so it's a much newer tyre. This tyre, if you're a fan of the original ExtremeContact Sport, you'll be happy to know that this tyre is more an evolution than a revolution, but the previous product was also very, very good. Continental promised more dry grip, more wet grip, and probably most importantly for me, better steering dynamics, a sharper steering response and better handling, which is something I value a lot. I have spent a load of time on this tyre in my life, probably over 10,000 test miles and some personal miles as well. I've only been to the launch event to this tyre, so I'm excited to see how it compares because Continental are promising a lot from this tyre. As you're watching this video, I'm going to assume you're a bit of a tyre geek, so here's some of the headline stats which I haven't quite memorised yet. Both tyres, material-wise, they're very, very close. There's less than 1/3 of a pound difference between the two, with the Continental being slightly heavier. The peak and average tread depth across the two tyres is almost identical, and while both tyres are, of course, they're the same size, 235, 40, 18, the Michelin does have a slightly wider unmounted tread width, because you can get variations in the size, but that's going to change when it's mounted, so I'll let you know the data. Obviously, I haven't mounted them yet. In terms of sidewall stiffness, I know that's very important. I get asked that a lot, and I find it really interesting. The issue is you can't really compare a Michelin UUHP product to other tyres because Michelin have, well, I think it's C3M. It's basically a very special manufacturing process, which means the tyres feel different from every other tyre. In bigger sidewall sizes, you can actually turn them inside out almost, which is ridiculous. So that means these generally feel a little bit softer on the sidewall, but when they're mounted up, that balances out. But of these two tyres, the Michelin definitely has a bit more squeeze and a bit more deflection. It's not much. The Continental has a firmer inside shoulder as well than outside, it feels like. So it's going to be really interesting to see once these are mounted up on the vehicle and how they both respond to steering inputs, because that's something fascinating. That's what I love about tyres the most, I think. As this is a real world review, I'll be using these tyres exactly as I expect you'll be using. So I'll be commuting on them, I'll be doing road trips, I'll be doing spirited drives, and if the stars align, I'll be going to Utah Motorsport Campus and doing some track work on a track day to give you a really in-depth view of how these tyres position themselves. This is very new, this is very old. They're both aiming to be exactly the same tyre. Let's find out what the differences are. How are the tyres on the road? Well, it's so close. They're almost the same, but they're also quite different. So bear with me, and I say that a lot in videos at the moment. Firstly, I really want to say thank you to a couple of companies for helping support independent tyre testing, because without them, this wouldn't be happening. And there's a few more videos coming with this setup. Firstly, Honda for lending me this very awesome Honda Civic Si. It's a sub $30,000 car, and it's fully loaded and has a proper diff and has lane assist and adaptive cruise control, and it's fun, man. It's really good on the road. So thank you so much to Honda, and thank you to Fitment Industries for lending me 12 wheels, 3 sets of wheels, so I can do proper back-to-back testing without having to worry about wheel influence. So that's really cool. If you're looking for wheels and tyres, go check out Fitment Industries. They're not a sponsor of the video, they're just supporting independent tyre testing, which I think is even better. So I'm really grateful to them. The tyres on the road, I don't know, I really want to tell you which one I prefer, but I can't, and I'll tell you why. They're very close in a lot of categories, but every time one tyre gets a small advantage, the other one takes it back in the next. Let me give you an example. NVH, noise, vibration, harshness, which is the comfort and the noise levels of the tyres. The Continental has the slightest edge in sort of general road comfort over the smaller imperfections, but the Michelin is slightly better over the bigger impact. So score 1 Conti, score 1 Michelin. As for noise, I think the general pitch of the noise on general normal surfaces is very similar, but I think the pitch or the tone of the noise from the Continental is slightly better on tarmac But on concrete, the Michelin has a slight edge because the Conti can get a little bit drony. So what about the steering forces of the tyre? These are ultra high performance summer tyres, so steering and feedback and sportiness is very important. Well, again, they're kind of trading blows. Around centre, small steering angles, I'm finding the Continental a little bit too vague for my taste. You can't quite get what's going on at these very small steering angles, but conversely, as you get to the larger steering angles, the tyre loads up in a really nice linear manner and it feels sporty because it turns very quickly. The Michelin, on the other hand, is better around this centre, but as I found with the Pilot Sport 4S a number of times now, you get this steer once, turn twice. So you get the initial bit of the turn and then the steering forces build up very quickly as the tyre kind of obtains the slip angle and the steering forces, and it's not as linear as the Continental, and that's something I don't like about the Michelin, and I've said this 1,000 times, so if you're a regular viewer of the channel, you know this. However, once you're in the turn, and once that Michelin has dug down, it's a bit more adjustable and it gives you a bit more detail. So again, it's 50-50. As for at limit behavior, well, I'm on public roads, you never really get to at limit, but around the limit, the Continental seems to give up its grip a little bit earlier and breaks into understeer a little bit quicker, but does recover very quickly. The Michelin does too. But where the Michelin seems to work, as I've already said, this Civic Si has a proper diff. On mid-corner, corner exit, as you're getting back on the power, the Michelin really does allow you to kind of like, it works with the diff a little bit better, and you accelerate out the corner without as much of a issue or without really thinking about it. So very, very small differences between the two sets of tyres on the road. I did kind of expect this, but I thought I would have more difference. I thought by now I would have a conclusion of which one I preferred, but honestly, I'm still on the fence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a track day work, and hopefully you'll join me there any second. The good news is I've made it to a track day. The bad news is this. Not ideal. I booked myself in a 2-hour track day slot with 2 1-hour sessions. I ran the Continentals in the first session. I checked the weather forecast. It was meant to be sunny the entire time, no sign of rain. Right at the end of the first session, it started looking like it was about to cloud over. And here in Utah, the weather changes very fast because of the mountains. And as you can now see, I managed 5 laps on the Michelin, and I'm definitely not going to get any more dry running if we get any more running, because it's stopped because of lightning. So let me quickly fill you in on what I found. So I've done a full hour on the Continental across 3 sessions. So 3 quick sessions basically, plus a few like learning laps. What I found is the Continental has good steering. There is a bit of like delay. It's not quite as sharp as you'd want for track, but for road tyre it felt very good. But it did break into understeer a little bit earlier than I would have wanted. And obviously this is a front wheel drive hatch. It's a hot hatch, but it's designed to go on the road, so the setup isn't going to be particularly oversteer focused. It's going to be more focused on understeer. The endurance of the tyre was excellent. It did start to feel hot after 3 or 4 laps, and these are quite long laps. They're 2-minute laps, and I was pushing pretty hard. But it did start to feel hot, but the actual grip didn't seem to drop off too much. And looking at the tyres after doing all these laps, they still essentially look brand new, which is, I'm very impressed at. I thought after the first couple of sessions there'd be some tearing in the centre rib, which I often get. But no, it was absolutely fine. Managed the pressures pretty well. We were aiming for 36 hot, and I pretty much got those. I was coming in after every session and checking. Now, the Michelin, I've done 5 laps. But in those 5 laps, I did learn a little bit. The Michelin does, like on the road, it's very, very close, but it's a little bit slower to react and settle in on the tyre, which is something I found with the 4S an awful lot. But the advantage it did have over the Continental is like mid-corner and corner exit, when you're on the power, it just seemed to work with the diff. This Honda Civic Si, for a sub $30,000 car, has an actual proper locking front diff, and it's very, very good. It's not like some fake electronic braking thing. It's a proper diff. You can really feel it working, and the Michelin seemed to help it work a little bit more. So corner exit, it did feel a little bit quicker. Like I said, I only did 5 laps, and a couple of those had traffic, so there was only really 1 or 2 fast laps. But my fastest lap on the Continental was 1 minute 56.5, and my fastest lap on the Michelin was at 1 minute 56.4. So in terms of lap time, there was pretty much nothing in it. In terms of enjoyment, it's a difficult one to say specifically for track, because really, if you really want to enjoy track, you want to be looking at a 200 tread wear track tyre, or something even more focused, like a proper full-on track tyre. If I was to pick one, I really need more laps on the Michelin to decide whether I liked that characteristic of being a little bit softer, but a little bit better mid-corner, corner exit. But longevity-wise, what I can tell you about the Continental is like, it's outstanding. Like it did get hot, it's a road tire, but the longevity and the tread wear is almost nothing. And again, pushing quite hard. So I definitely would say the Continental is a good option for track. I can't tell you how the Michelin would wear on this circuit. I've had tests where the Michelin's worn very high and tests where it's barely worn at all. It really just depends on the vehicle and the circuit. But from the few laps I have done on it, they do seem quite comparable in ultimate lap time. So as you might have noticed, the guys at Utah Motorsport Campus were actually really, really awesome. And they let me hang around till later in the day when all the rain had gone and the track had dried up. The sun hadn't came out, so the track was a lot cooler. So it was actually quite a bit faster, but they let me hang around and get in some more laps, both on the Michelin and the Continental, which I really, really appreciated. Highly recommend, if you're in the Utah area, check out the track days at Utah Motorsport Campus. Now, I didn't actually find out anything particularly new. I really want to be able to blend the first half of the turn from the Continental with the second half of the turn from Michelin. Obviously that tire doesn't exist, so I'm still completely on the fence about which one I'd pick. The endurance of the tires, which I touched upon about the Continental, and this is the left front of the Continental. And I did about 20 fast laps, so that's almost half race distance. And like it looks completely, it hasn't been driven on the road, so there's still a bit of like pickup on it. But in terms of wear, it's incredible. And the Michelin pretty much came out exactly the same. I will, by the time I've edited this video, put some tread depths on the screen to tell you exactly which was better, but I think they're going to be almost inconsequentially close.
Now the tyres are demounted, I'm happy to report the wear was almost identical, both in tread depth lost and how they wore on track, with the left front showing similar levels of rib wear on both sets.
So if they're very similar on track driving and endurance on track, what else is there? Well, both tyres have a 30,000 mile tread wear warranty. Again, they match, they're together. However, the Continental warranty is slightly better. There is different sizes. The Continental ExtremeContact Sport 02 is available in 77 sizes, but it starts at 15 inch and goes all the way to 21 inch. Whereas the Michelin has 120 non-OE options from 17 inches to 22 inches. But if you add in OE options, it's over 200. But obviously we're not talking about OE tyres, we're talking about aftermarket tyres here. The Continental, I think I prefer the sidewall slightly on the Continental, but if the Michelin size you're looking at has the new soft velvet touch sidewall, that's a no-brainer. The Michelin wins the sidewall. The Continental does sit a bit narrower on the rim and doesn't really have any curb protection, pretty much none at all. So the Michelin does have a little bit of curb protection, so that is a tick for Michelin.
As I couldn't test the wet grip of the tyres properly, I've not talked about it, but we do have this data point, albeit it is from the launch event of the Continental. It shows the tyres, at least in the size Continental tested, should be comparable.
So that essentially just leaves price. Now I paid, let me check this, I paid $952 for the Michelin, and at the same retailer, the Continental is $899 today at time of filming. So that's $50 extra in your pocket. I know this is quite small, but if you scale up to a bigger size, these are 235, 40, 18, so it's quite a small size, and they're quite cheap, $1,000 for tires cheap. But if you're looking at a big 19 or 20 inch size, that percentage gap means you get more in your pocket, maybe $100, maybe a bit more. So if that's important to you, the Conti is the tire to pick. But if it's not, I think probably what I'm suggesting is if you've had the Michelin for a while and you're happy with it, change things up, try the Continental. I don't think you'll be disappointed. And if you've been using the Continental and never tried the Michelin, maybe flip it around and try the Michelin. They are different products, but they are so similar. It's just different personalities of the tires. And I think it's good for people to experience that. Don't just stick with what you know, try something new. And this is, if you're a Michelin person, which I know a lot of you are, this is something worth trying. Finally, I'm gonna cut the final question off at the pass. What's the difference between the Continental ExtremeContact Sport 02 and the SportContact 7? Now, the SportContact 7 is a European aftermarket in OE tyre, but in the US it's OE only. And it is a more OE focused tyre. OE means it comes fitted as original equipment. The ExtremeContact Sport 02 doesn't exist in Europe, and I don't think it has any OEs or is going for any OEs. It's got some tuner OEs, but no like factory OEs. What does that mean in terms of differences between the SportContact 7 and this? probably means, now I've asked Continental and they've not tested it, no one's tested this, but based on what OEs require from tyres, you'll find that the SportContact 7 probably has slightly better wet grip. It probably, almost definitely has better rolling resistance, but it probably won't have quite as much endurance on track. So they're the two things. And general, like the Continental SportContact 7 doesn't have the 30,000 mile treadwear warranty. So there's how those two split up. There's very few cases where you have the option of buying both tyres. It's just OE sizes in America where you could realistically pick between the two, but then it's a tuned OE tyre, so it doesn't really count. Anyway, a huge thank you once again to Honda and Fitment Industries for supporting this with the car and wheels. I really appreciate them, so go check them out. The Civic Si is great. These wheels are beautiful. These were Fitment Industries suggestion, and I'm very happy with them. They sit very nicely on the car. There is a Patreon if you want to support further independent testing. Check out the Tyre Reviews Instagram if you want to know what's happening next with these wheels and tyres, because the next test is a 3-set test, and I think you'll find it very interesting. It's something I get asked about a lot. I'm excited to do it. And as always, any questions below, and safe motoring.